Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to the last session of the MNAPG annual conference. Glad you can join us both in person and online. So I am honored with introducing the Women and Problem Gambling panel. So Cassandra is an educational professional who struggled with compulsive gambling since her mid-20s. She is currently in recovery for compulsive gambling and has recently started a weekly online fellowship group for Black women who also struggle with gambling. She is also a survivor of domestic violence, and it was through her recovery in gambling she was able to get to her safety planning, and she will be joining us on Zoom. We also have Dorothy. Wave, Dorothy.
Hello.
This is Dorothy. She is a Vietnam veteran with a 19 plus years of recovery. She, quote, made it my last bet on the way to the GPT recovery program in Brecksville, Ohio in 2003. I believe sharing our experience, strength, and hope is the most powerful part of recovery. All of what I have learned, all of what we as recovering compulsive gamblers share can help both gamblers and clinicians save lives. This connection has given meaning to my life, and if I can help just one person break through from the madness, I am grateful. We have Tara.
Hello.
Yeah. Tara is a woman in long-term recovery from compulsive gambling who is committed to supporting other women in recovery find hope and healing. Inspired by messages of recovery from others, she became a recovery coach and began a podcast, Ambitious Addicts, to amplify stories of personal transformation through recovery. Ambitious Addicts includes Tara's personal experience recovering from compulsive gambling and features guests who have achieved recovery from any addiction and are now living the lives they never imagined were possible. And our moderator, Latasha, is a Grateful Gamanon member since April 2016. She lives in Minnesota and is happily divorced with 2 daughters. No, wave it high. Be proud.
You represent the whole family.
Yep. Her daughter is in the audience right now for those online, and is currently writing her first book, Life After Divorce, Be Better, Not Bitter. Latasha believes it is possible to thrive in recovery. As a divorcee, she is passionate about speaking, teaching, and mentoring others because there will always be others after her. She is a workshop speaker for Minnesota's Gamblers Anonymous and Gamanon Annual Conference on topics such as rebuilding trust, communication, and love a day at a time, compulsive gambling, It's a Family Affair, and the Recipe for Hope Through Addiction, Recovery, and Relapse. In the midst of the pandemic, she left her previous Director of Learning and Leadership position to experience what she calls a Black girl sabbatical. For 14 months, she embraced a healing and self-discovery journey of prioritizing her mental health and well-being, brave during a pandemic. She recently launched her Black Girl Sabbatical coaching, consulting, public speaking, training business to support other women to prioritize themselves and their mental health and well-being, while also gaining financial independence. She lives by her bold Black sabbatical statement of choose you and win.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the last. Come on, take it in for the team. Right? So, good afternoon, everyone. Almost good evening, everyone. I'm just thankful for all of you who have attended, traveling out in this Minnesota weather to attend this conference. And I also appreciate those virtually, who are committed to continuous learning, as well. As Kitty says, my name is Latasha Cox, and I'm a grateful Gamanon member. I'm excited to be a part of this experience on the topic of women and gambling. So we have two panelists joining us in person, one virtually, and so I first want to kick off by giving people just sharing their brief bio. So if Cassandra wants to go first.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Cassandra Belton, and I'm a grateful compulsive gambler in recovery. My last gamble date was April 2nd, 2020. So what you see here is I'm a Zoom baby. I've always done my recovery via Zoom. My life as a compulsive gambler was horrible. And how I got to the space is I wanted to commit suicide. I was a person that I did slot play, scratch offs, and that was my life 2 years ago. And the suicide ideation got me to recovery, and I'm thankful for my recovery. I'm also a mother. I have two sons, one that's 28 and one that's 10. I'm also leaving my marriage in my recovery. And I'm thankful because I was in a very toxic marriage. What led me to recovery? What led me to wanting to stop? Because I really wanted to kill myself. My house was in foreclosure. I remember actually driving and almost hitting someone coming from the casino. I almost killed someone. And the pain that I suffered as a gambler, it's horrible. Very, very horrible. But today my life is different, very different. I'm actually happy to say that just this weekend I shared my strength, hope, and experience with National Geographic, sharing my triumphs and my challenges with gambling. And it hasn't been easy. And I'm thankful today. I hope your questions help drive for me to speak even more. And with that, thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. Tara, would you like to go?
Sure. Are you guys hearing me okay? All right. Tara, recovering compulsive gambler. I feel like if I hold it, it's better.
Yeah.
It's one of those tiny mics you see people on with the Reels or TikTok or whatever they do. I don't know. I've been in recovery since July 30th of 2016. Well, that's the date of my last bet. Like Cassandra, my gambling led me to places I never thought that I would go. I also experienced suicidal ideation. I started gambling at a young age, and my gambling introduction, like many of us in recovery from compulsive gambling, was early, and I didn't realize even that gambling was a risky behavior. But I was a poker player, a blackjack player, and also a slot player, and also a pull tab player, and also, could I place a bet? And I'm grateful to be able to be here and speak about women and from a woman's perspective about what recovery's been like, and hope that we can share our experience, strength, and hope in a way that has those in the audience considering women when it comes to research, as well as treatment approaches that might work uniquely for us and also for the whole. So I'm grateful to be here to share my perspective, and hope that you all take something away from this that you can put into practice in serving those in your community.
Thank you, Tara. And then Dorothy.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, I'm glad to be here. It's an honor to be able to share my story, even if we only have a little bit of time to do so. I'm 71 years old. I've had a life that's been filled with lots of gifts and lots of tragedy. I started off in a very dysfunctional family. My mother was the head of the Brownie Troops and the PTA. People in our community saw us as a great family of 5 children. My father was, though, a gambler, and he was had a lot of problems. He was a dreamer. He was an alcoholic, and so there was always this crazy, at one minute we were doing great, and the next minute we weren't. And I had been sexually molested by my stepfather from 4 to 12, and it was interesting because I learned to tell secrets. I learned to go to school every day with a smile on my face, and nobody knew what went on behind closed doors. I mention that because later on, it stayed in my life, the way I kept things in different categories. I managed to, 1 minute, be able to be very successful, and another, then nobody knew quietly that I had low self-esteem, that I was afraid of everything. There were always these challenges. But the good part was I strove for excellence my whole life. I wanted to be better. I wanted my life to be better. I thought, actually, I survived my childhood because I thought I was helping my family to get by. I thought my secrets would make our family better and okay, and I kept hoping. I was a kid with a lot of hope, and I was teacher's pet. I excelled in sports. I was a surfer in my teenage years and excelled in tennis. And when I went into the service, so I could have my education paid for, I also went in with the best of intention. It was during the Vietnam War. I didn't particularly believe in the war, but I believed in our country. And I went in and I marched down the field and I felt proud. And I really wanted to do really well. And unfortunately, I suffered a trauma in the military with 3 guys that attacked me, and I got out early because of it. What I didn't know in those days was what PTSD was, but I was slowly showing big signs of it through behavior. By the time I got out of the service early, I was drinking too much. I was irresponsible. I'd go to college and then I'd drop out. I'd get a job and then I'd leave that one. It was pretty erratic for a while. And then I had a miracle happen. And this followed me my whole life, where I felt like I had an angel on my shoulder. And that angel was, at that time, my husband. I met him. He was much older than me. He became my mentor, my teacher, and my love. And he was proud of me. He taught me a whole lot. He thought I could do anything I put my mind to. And we were quite a team. We started a business together. He had run mid-sized chemical companies, but we worked well together, so we started very much a niche business in the art conservation business, and we did well. We were the #1 supplier for this field all around the world, traveled around the world, had 3,200 products, even went on QVC, and Home Shopping Network was one of them. Throughout that period of 22 years that I'm describing in my marriage, it was pretty great. I still had my depressions and my sometimes not being able to get out of bed, but my husband put up with me and we got through it. And in that period of time, we also had 2 children. And we had them late in life. I was 39 when I had my daughter, and at 42 in May of that year, my husband was killed in an auto accident. And by no fault of his, it was a pretty devastating accident. My son was in the car with him. He was 8 years old. My daughter was with me, and she was 4. And thank goodness she wasn't in the car. And Zachary was okay, but he did suffer trauma. And he saw his father pass away and tried to revive him. And it was pretty devastating at the time. This was May of 1994. And it was a year of hell. My mother was diagnosed with supranuclear palsy, and within 7 months died of my husband's death. And in December of that year, I was held at gunpoint and raped, and thought my children and I were going to be killed. We had a gun on us the whole 7 hours. It's a long story, won't go into it, but the police did come and rescue me. But what was so interesting is that at that time I lived on a house of our dreams. We had built it ourselves. It was with an architect. It was on the side of a mountain. It was glorious, and we had 345 acres with 5 Commodore dogs, which I ended up even doing rescue work for this kind of a dog, and we were very known in the field of the breeding field of this special breed. So I was very involved with all kinds of activities besides my business, and our whole life was involved with either our business or our home. And then all of a sudden, my husband's gone, my knight in shining armor, and then I'm attacked. And I also am 42 at the time, and I literally fell apart. I couldn't function very well. I made really bad decisions. I even hired somebody from my church to be our executive vice president because my partner was gone, and he was an nincompoop. I just think I wanted somebody to take care of me, and I didn't know that. And he helped really, he hired all kinds of people for our business and his relatives. And suddenly, this 22-year-old business that had been so spectacular no longer was a carriage trade business. We were doing shoddy work. And I was, one by one making bad decisions, and so I gave up, and I didn't sell my business. I literally closed the doors and walked away. Crazy thinking. I did in that period of time. We moved 29 times. I could never go back to my house after I was harmed and went through that trauma. And during those 29 times of moving, it had took its toll on my children as well as they grew up. We were in litigation with State Farm over my husband's accident for 13 years. It was a very trying period of my life. But then one day, I don't know, it was after I left my business. I went to lunch with a friend, and we had our lunch, and as we were leaving the casino, which I had lived in this town with casinos my whole adult life, and I thought it was stupid to gamble. And so as we were leaving, I sat down at a table with her, at a slot machine with her, because, she just had to spend her $20 on her lucky machine. In a boredom way, I put in $3 and I won $140,000. Now, this was at a stage in my life that I was flat. I had walked away from my whole life, except for my kids. And at that time, it was what I call the perfect storm, because it took away all my pain. I no longer felt pain. I felt hope. I felt like I might just make it again. Maybe this was the answer. Maybe God was looking out for me. And I began gambling.
Thank you so much, Dorothy, for sharing that. It goes into our first question. Here that you mentioned about like keeping secrets in your childhood, right, and the trauma that you experienced. So thank you for sharing that with all of us. Compulsive gambling is like known as the silent or the secret addiction, right? Because if someone's on meth, more than likely as they go on addiction, you see the sores on their face, right? If they're heroin addict, they're nodding off, but like compulsive gamblers are like walking zombies. Mm-hmm. You won't know, behind their face that they actually are suffering in silence to an addiction that's just as harmful to their mind, body, and soul, and family and friends as other addictions. And so the first question that I have for you all, and we'll start with Cassandra first, is what do you believe are some of the misconceptions people have about women and gambling?
Some of the misconceptions are definitely that we play only at slots. We play the nickel machine, the penny machine. I was one where I had my preferences. I wasn't a table player. The misconception is also the classism that takes place also in recovery. The misconception is that women don't play cards, that we are not good at betting, period, that we play the cute games. And then it's also a race in particular that, as a Black woman, that I didn't have the income to do it. Regardless, when you go to the casino, you see all kinds of people, all kinds. You see people playing all kinds of games. So there's a classism that's in recovery when you're in the rooms talking. It's almost as if, for example, if someone wants to share, they'll share in a way to let you know that they were a high roller. That to me is a misconception or a language that needs to change. But from my experience being a compulsive gambler, I saw everybody in the casino, everyone. So that's just one of my challenges that now I'm in recovery. You know, the casino is one place. You're going to have the nickel machine. You're going to have the penny machine. But then now in recovery, that classism that takes place. So that's just something that I noticed.
Thank you, Cassandra. Tara?
Are you guys hearing me okay? I'm trying to just not have to hold the mic. Are you hearing me okay or not? Okay. Deb's like, nope. I'll hold the mic. Okay. I think for me, the misconceptions, I would echo what Cassandra says about the assumption about how we play or why we play. I did go to therapy, not for gambling, but ahead of my recovery. And it was almost like there was this assumption that I was just gambling for fun and I had it under control. The therapist I was seeing at the time said those words to me. Well, sounds like you have the gambling under control. But drilled me on how many drinks I had over the weekend. And don't you know that could be binge drinking, but no digging deeper about the gambling. So I think there may be an assumption being made that women aren't at risk for addiction to gambling, and that clinicians have an opportunity to go a little deeper around some of that betting behavior. That might also be true about men. I think this assumption too about the what we play and the how we play goes even further, especially as we're talking about the legalization of sports betting becoming so prevalent, in that that we're not sports bettors. In addition to learning poker at a young age, my grandpa was pulling numbers too, and I learned fantasy sports real quick. I was one of the first people to sign up for those bracket pools at work every time there was one. So sports betting also is a risky behavior for us too. So I think probably the largest misconception that I see, there's probably two that I would say, if I had to narrow it down to two things that I wish were different, I would say one, that we gamble any differently than the opposite sex or for any different reason. I think that crosses genders, and it doesn't do us any good to have assumptions made about how or why we gamble. And then the other one I would say that I'd like to see a change happen in is that we don't need anything different for recovery. I have some trauma in my life that also involved men, and I may need something different in my recovery in terms of a safe place to share. That's a designated safe space just for women without men's voices in the room. And so I think the misconception is that you can apply some of the same treatment modalities to men and women without taking that broader context of their lived experience as that gender or as that race into account, because it shapes the lens in which we see the world. And the way recovery works for me personally has been more healing to be in spaces with women only and in shared spaces also. I need both.
Thank you, Tara. Dorothy?
With the most amount of respect and for you guys' different experience than mine, I will say that for me, maybe it's because I'm older and I'm maybe old, came from years back, but I had no experience with differences. I began in my 12 steps in AA in the 80s. I went to AA for 9 years, and I fell in love with the 12 steps. And I got a really good teaching with it, and it integrated in my life. So when I went to, the years later, finding out I was a compulsive gambler, and I began in GA, I already had that as my base, my foundation. And I never experienced that in my own experience with the GA. And then in GTP, the Gambling Treatment Program, we were just all the same. We just shared our experience, strength, and hope with one another, and we connected with each other within recovery, and we learned from one another, and nobody identified me as being different. Now, I did play everything, but I finally played the slots. I don't feel embarrassed about it or feel like somebody's labeling me, only a slot player. I did it because I truly, the reason I gambled was I thought I could manifest $1 million. I know that sounds crazy, but I did. And when I was in the casinos, at the beginning it was wonderful because you get wined and dined and treated with all kinds of comps, and when you're flown here, and I played tables, I did all kinds of things. But when I really started looking at it all, I wanted to win the machine that said I could win $1 million. See, I'd already won 140, so I knew it was possible. And that's what, and I couldn't win at a card game $1 million. At least I didn't know how. And so for me, it was, I never felt like anybody was judging me for anything. And I love the programs of the 12 steps because they have a foundation that has proven over time that when you surrender, you have a shot at getting well. So that's been my experience.
Thank you so much.
Can I just
go
add
ahead?
something quick? Yeah, I think my experience in 12-step has been that I wasn't judged by people in the room. I wasn't judged by my peers in recovery.
Okay.
I'm speaking of the misconceptions I see and hear in the research, or the holes I see in the research that we're not talking about women specifically, or we're generalizing women. My experience in recovery with the people in the rooms, they got me because they were a lot like me. Where I had some challenge in the rooms was my own trauma with men and not feeling safe talking about, if we're talking 12-step, my step 4 work and my resentment, a lot of it involved men. And sometimes if I was talking about those things historically that involved men, the men in the room gave me the male perspective of excuse making about why someone created harm in my life. And that was not helpful to my recovery. I know that I had no part in someone being abusive to me. So that part for me, I found most useful to share in women-only spaces because the women didn't do that to me. So that's the perspective I was speaking from.
Thank you very much, Tara, for clarifying. And so I just want to piggyback off of Cassandra's, thought, about different demographics and so forth of people at the casino, right? And so, what I've known from dragging my own ex-husband out of the casino is that that the casino is a melting pot of people, right? And so, in talking and doing my own recovery, journey, and talking to my ex-husband about, what is it about, that you have to go? Is it the air and the whining and dining that you're talking about, right? And who's in there with you? Right? He had buddies that he had, his camaraderie, with, and he's telling me well, such and such was there, and such. And I'm like, yo, people that I know, one guy was an executive director of a local nonprofit that I knew. And I was like, what? Dr. Wu is there too? Right? And so what I've learned with compulsive gambling is that no one is off limits to addiction. Right? And so my second question is what support did you seek out? Or who did you turn to when you became aware that you had a problem? You might not have been aware that you had an addiction, right? But that you were aware that you had a problem. Cassandra?
It was a hard reality when I kept purchasing the scratch-offs and buying alcohol at the same time, and the times of the day that I was going. I was going before work to the casino, after work, to the casino, chasing the wins, chasing the losses. And in my background in education, dealing with behaviors, I just felt different. My whole well-being felt different. And the reality of the mail, when the mail came in and it said, your house is soon to be in foreclosure with the state that I live in, I was like, oh, gotta hide this little thing here. My whole well-being felt different. My body was different. My parenting was different. The way I worked as an educator was different. I felt low, extremely low. The suicide ideations, I really wanted to kill myself. And I guess because of the physical quantity of scratch-offs that I had in my hand as well, my paycheck was gone like every time for like two years straight. It was just gone. But it wasn't like that all the time. It progressively, as it says in the reading, it got worse over time. And the second part of the question was, how did I seek out help?
Like, yeah, the question is like, what support did you seek out, to get?
Well, the supports I had in place, I got a GA counselor in the state of Maryland that was free of charge. And I'm glad that that was in place here for the state of Maryland, because it kind of allowed me to share in a space where I didn't have to necessarily use my insurance. And I was awarded a number of sessions, which I could have used for a whole year, but I was later dismissed because I did so well with my recovery. And my counselor, she looked like me. She was a Black woman. And I also had a peer specialist here in the state of Maryland. When I called the hotline, because my number is a New York number, I immediately was hooked to the New York GA. But then talking to that counselor on the phone, he then linked me to the state that I live in with the Maryland GA help. And from then it just spiraled. The peer specialist got me connected to a GA counselor, then the Zoom rooms. From the Zoom rooms, then, being in that space, I then created my own space. So it wasn't just one thing that kind of sustained me in recovery. It was many things. The GA counselor, the peer specialist. I worked in my own therapy. I have my own therapist, mentors. I did not necessarily have a sponsor. I don't have a GA sponsor. And actually, I don't think that I want one, to be honest. I have my own reasons about that, but eventually I'll get there.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. And like, the one thing about recovery is that it's not one size fit all, right? It's all about like what you need individually for you to thrive. So thank you for sharing. And then Tara?
Can you repeat the question?
What supports did you seek out, or who did you turn to when you realized you had a problem?
Yes, my last day gambling, I left the casino with some suicidal ideation, and my life experience includes losing a parent who died by suicide. And so I have a single mother of a 24-year-old. Did not want to leave my son with the same pain that I had been left with, and so I chose to live that day. And I called my big brother. That was the first phone call I made when I got home. And he asked me what my plan was, because my little sister is a big planner, not impulsive at all like me. And he said, okay, well, we gotta talk to sis, and what's the plan if you're gonna call her and tell her? She's gonna want to know what you're gonna do next. And my life history includes a lot of relationships with people with substance use. I also used substances, but gambling's what got me kind of crawling on my knees, asking for help. And so I knew that there was this 12-step thing. The option of inpatient treatment had not entered my mind, and I knew nothing about the Minnesota State Problem Gambling Council, which I wonder, Cassandra, if you were working with Maryland's Council on Problem Gambling, or if it was GA, because GA doesn't have counselors. But we do support each other in a 12-step recovery program. And I knew about 12-step recovery, so I used the internet to find meetings. And my friends who had found hope and healing from substance use used 12-step, and they had turned their lives around pretty unimaginably. And so I knew that was possible. for an addict to find recovery through that. And inpatient treatment as a single mom did not feel like an option that I could even consider. So the supports that family, my sister, my brother, and then 12-step recovery. And I made a plan to go to meetings, thanks to the website that was available to me. I kind of mapped out what are the meetings I'm going to go to, found my home meeting very quickly, found some women in recovery who are now my longtime sisters in recovery, and just have continued to attend 12-step. But I also plug in some other supports for myself. So therapy has been also part of that, and then some coaching also is what helps me stay in recovery now. One thing my sister did too that I think is really helpful for a lot of people in early recovery is just removing complete access to my finances. I earned a pretty good living, but I did not know how to keep my money. So I had someone else keep my money, and I had prepaid debit cards that were only at gas and groceries was all that was used for. So I had a financial accountability partner too. Very fortunate that my sister said yes to taking on that task. That's what worked for me.
Thank you, Tara. Dorothy?
Let's see. I actually spent years trying to find out what was wrong with me, going to therapy and reading self-help books. And even when I was gambling, I never shared with the help I was getting, the therapist I was seeing, that I was gambling. I would turn to her and admit that I was making bad decisions and I needed help in all kinds of ways. But I had learned all my life to keep these secrets, and I honestly kept them for myself as well. I didn't know that I had a gambling problem until I finally was really bad, and I couldn't. And I finally said to myself, why can't I stop at night? I'd win, and then I couldn't leave all night long. And why was that happening? And around that same time, this miracle happened. I was in the VA meeting. A man stood up and he said, "I just came from the GTP program in Brecksville, and it saved my life." And it wasn't until that moment that I said, what could that be? And I was on the phone to the GTP, and within a week I was there. I even spent my last $5 getting there on a layover in Vegas. And I got there, and what helped me was that program. I ended up going to it for 3 times, and each time I was learning more about also other things that were other problems of mine. But I, of course, was definitely doing work on gambling itself. So therapy within the GTP, the GA, and going back on my AA experience were the things that helped me. Today, I still work on PTSD. I still work on what I call the isms, which is, I can even compulsive spend sometimes. I can get grandiose at times. I want more than I should want. I have a lot of desires, and I want to have excellence in my life, and so that sometimes puts my life in kind of in a wobbly place. So I seek help all the time.
Thank you, Dorothy. And so what I've learned about compulsive gambling, is that, it's great winning the money. The problem is keeping it, And so I want to the next question of how did your gambling disorder impact your family, your friends, or your work? Cassandra?
Oh boy, I couldn't keep money in my bank account. When I won my first hand pay, I thought I was Robin Hood. I actually bought all this stuff for my classroom and my students. But chasing the next hand pay was the problem. Trying to get, I want another winning because it made everybody feel good. It made me feel good. Yeah, it was horrible. And the facade of a hand pay, you finally feel like you're being seen. Because the whole concept of they put the money in your hand, when you win, the big bonus. You know, they put it in your hand and you're seeing, and I thought that I was doing a good thing by spending it on my family. You know, here, I'm able to give you so much money. You know, I'm able to give you this. I'm able to buy this. Yeah, I did a lot of trying to buy affection. Um, dangerous, dangerous. And then trying to, again, get that same sort of hand pay so I can give again. It's a destructive cycle. It's a facade.
Thanks so much, Cassandra. Like it, you know, compulsive gambling is a never-ending like circle. You know, right? And so I just want to just go ahead, Tara.
That word facade, yes. I think that's how my family, friends, and work were all impacted the most, is they had no idea who I was. I was lying to everybody. I was pretending to be fine. I was pretending to be the superhero, single mother, brave woman that everyone told me I was. I was wrapped up in this little bow of fierce self-sufficiency and independency and the woman who needed nobody. And inside I was crumbling, and I was running away to casinos to either have a really fun time because I wasn't creating fun in my daily life, or to not feel the feelings of pain that I had never been taught how to cope with. So I was high performer at work. I was the mom who showed up to every baseball game. I was the friend who would drop everything and be there for my best friend. And put on the happy face. And I was not honest with a single person in my world about what was going on for me. So I was keeping up a pretty good facade. I also, you know, I can look back at this now and look at how different my life is. And I was talking to my friend Deb about this earlier, like look back on the last 6 years, and there's a lot to be proud of in this time in recovery. And if I think about 6 years ago when I entered the program of recovery, if I looked back at the 6 years before that, there was like almost nothing to be proud of. I'm actively engaged in my community now. I research who candidates are for political races and pay attention to what's going on in my local economy. I contribute as a volunteer. I share experience, strength, and hope with other people. I'm contributing to the economy in a positive way that impacts, you know, the choices that I vote with my ballot and with my dollars. I'm living by my values, the values that I always knew I had, but I wasn't living by. I was a liar. I was deceptive. I was definitely underperforming in contrast to my capability. And so I was robbing a lot of people, including myself, of my full potential. And that's now I'm looking for opportunities to make up for all that lost ground.
Thank you, Tara. Dorothy?
That was wonderful. I feel the same way. I went through so many similar things. You know, the biggest thing for me was, you know, that when I lost my husband my kids were 4 and 8. And by the time I had tried to kill myself 3 times, they were in their teen years. And the last time, my daughter said, when I had the police brought them into the hospital, and she looked at me with this thing on my nose, and she said to my son, "Why would she want to leave me?" And when I went into the GTP program, it was with the knowledge that my children hated me. And my whole reason for wanting help at that time was probably to somehow get my children to love me again. They taught me that I had to first help myself, like the airplane thing where you put the air on your nose and then you have to do that before you put the air on your child. And I got that. And so I spent those early years knowing that I had to work hard, and my reason was my children. It then became myself, because by the time I had lost everything, I hated myself so bad, which is why I tried to kill myself, I decided that I was the worst mother possible and my kids would be better off without me. I truly thought that. And I had destroyed my reputation. I had destroyed, I had become a liar, a cheat, a thief. I had done anything I could to survive. And, you know, I went from, in my lifetime, I've had lots of grandiose life. I've had a lot of money and things, and I had gotten to the point of being homeless. I had gotten to the point of standing in milk lines. And by the way, nobody knew this. No one knew this was happening to me, but I knew it, and I didn't tell anybody. That's how I brought the milk home. But you know, that's what I did, because I had gotten so low, you know, hawking things and, you know, pawning things or whatever you call it. And so, you know, it was something to see me lose every spick of anything I had, you know, of self-worth. And then it, you know, the gift was that I slowly could build it back within recovery. And it took a lot. It took other people telling me, trusting that they were seeing something of value in me. And then it was like little teeny baby steps. And it took a number of years before I started, you know, doing better. And today I live a nice life. I have a really great relationship with my children. My son is having his first baby, and his family, and they're in their 30s, my children now, and I'm proud of them. And they love me, and they call me all the time, and we have a good relationship. And that's all because of recovery.
Thank you. And I forgot to share a couple things, and then I wanted to pull something out of Cassandra that she hasn't said yet. I mentioned that I'm a Grateful Gambler member, you know, and that my ex-husband is a compulsive gambler, and I'm writing a book about, like, living your best life, like, after divorce, you know, right? And for me...
Cassandra's ready to buy the book.
Oh, we're going to connect, because life can be so amazing. But, you know, as a Gambler member, like, I being on the other side, like, you're going through your own turmoil, you know, right, as the you know, the addict, and then as a family member, we're going through the same circle of chaos, you know, right? And so I reached out to like family, you know, and they're just all like, oh, hold your man down while he's, you know, hold your man up while he's down. And I'm like, no, he's sinking the boat. Like, as soon as I repair one hole, he's, you know, poking two more, you know, in there. And so for me, Gamanon became that place of peace, of that everyone in this, in my Anoka meeting, like, they get it, you know, that they either had a spouse or a couple of my group, we got daughters that are on the other side, you know, older and younger, you know, right? And so I just became involved in, like, speaking at different conferences, you know, here, because there weren't enough of us doing it, and there weren't enough Black women, you know, talking about addiction and talking about mental health, you know, right? And so, Cassandra, I want to pull you out for you to mention about the group that you had, you know,
the
created.
space that I created, the necessary space that I created.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, the space that I created came out of just chronic in the rooms where, you know, during George Floyd, conversations would come up, you know, after meetings, before meetings, racial insensitivity jokes. And here I am trying to come to a meeting and do recovery, and I got to be in a space of inequity and inclusivity. So I said, you know what? I want to meet some women that look like me, and see if they have these challenges and see what this is like. And I put the word out, and I started out just finding other women that wanted to do this, and it wasn't a hard sell at all. We started out with about 12 or 13. We now have about 7. I want to say 7.5. That's how I like to round it off. And I dedicated myself to every Sunday that I would do it, and I did it for about a year and a half. I recently have taken a break, but I'm reeling myself back in to do it because it took a lot of energy to do it. But I realized doing it that it was so purposeful for me to be with other women of color that had the challenges. And I realized that as much as the time came, it was so beautiful to hear the shares. And it was so beautiful to hear a voice that sounded like me, that knew what I was going through, or that really understood gambling in a sense of being a Black woman. You know, that was a space that was so unique and so purposeful. I had no idea. I just said, I just want to meet some Black people, you know, some Black women, and let's just talk. And it became, to me, almost spiritual every Sunday to do it. You know, we didn't follow all of the principles of GA. It's not a sanctioned GA meeting, but we did have a lot of components related to sisterhood in that space. And that was important to all of us. And I realized, you know, towards really doing it, how purposeful it was, because each time it was always one or two sisters that said, you know, with sincerity and humbleness, how that space was necessary for their recovery and how much they loved being in that space. So I realized that I kind of had to be there on Sundays, but it did take up a lot of time. I now have pulled back myself to ask for help, because that's one of the things that as a compulsive gambler that I didn't do. So we are in the process of recreating that space and trying to make it. I want some other people to come along with me. So I'm putting it out in the universe that more women will come to the 7.5 space and make it really unique and make it purposeful of what it could be, what it could be and what it started out as.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. So the question was, that I didn't say it, but I wanted you to pull it out first, was like, what did you find helpful in your early days of recovery? And so for you had to create the space that wasn't present.
I had to put my seat at the table. What does it come? Put myself at the table?
At the table of your recovery. So the question to you both is, what did you find helpful in your early stages of recovery?
I mentioned a couple of them already. Family support, certainly. But, I mean, GA saved my life, is how I see it. So helpful was hearing stories of recovery from other people. Sisterhood, having women to talk to about their experience and show me their strength and give me hope was absolutely critical to my recovery. There was no one else in my world who understood gambling addiction. There was a lot of dismissing. If it was even a real addiction, you know, oftentimes we hear, just stop, just don't go, just don't buy that ticket, whatever, you know, as if that's easy for us as people with addiction. So having that space to be in a place with other people who understood gambling and understood our version of insanity is what I really needed in early recovery. And then you finding a temporary sponsor first and then a long-term sponsor as well has been critical. And I would just, that's another version of sisterhood, you know, that's a one-to-one relationship. But for sure, the community of support that I found in 12-step recovery. And then now it's just lots and lots of women in recovery in my life, and all recovery, choosing to surround myself with people who show me that it's possible to continue to choose a life, not just gambling free and bet free, but a life of sobriety as well today.
Thank you. And Dorothy?
At the very beginning, it was real specific for me. I didn't know it because everything happened real fast. When I finally figured out I had a problem, and I went to GTP, the only thing that helped me was this old thing about being in AA years before. But I had to be away. I lived in a gambling town, Reno. And so I had to be totally away from casinos. And at that time, there weren't any casinos in Ohio, in Cleveland, where I am living now. And for me, I was so bad off that the lockdown at the GTP was really important to me. I had no money. I wasn't allowed to leave the hospital. And I was stuck there, and I'm not sure I could have made it otherwise. I really mean that. And then, of course, all the things that happened within the program were early on really, in the 12 steps and sharing with other people was that connection making. I had never shared with gamblers before, and to see that they had the same stuff going on, it was really important to me. And I think it was really valuable. We really did connect in these small little groups that we were in. We became very close, and that became a real part of my recovery. And then I accepting the fact that I couldn't help my kids until I got well, which I already said I know, but that was really important for me to get. Today today also it's about, and it was then too, but not so much at the very beginning, but learning about my post-traumatic stress disorder and how it affects even today. I have a need for a service dog because I am frightened about a lot of things still to this day. And I can't take a shower with soap in my eyes, I have to have my eyes open even if the soap gets in my eyes because I'm afraid of the dark. So knowing those kind of things helped me because they used to lead me to, escaping through gambling. I didn't know that then. Or the need to cover up my fibromyalgia pain by gambling would make me numb and not feel pain. So I had to learn those little things that helped me along the path of recovery. Today also, it's about making right decisions, paying my bills on time, feeling proud of myself, knowing I'm a good person and that I live in harmony with my values, which I didn't for so long while I was gambling. And even in my earlier years when I was so important and I thought everybody thought I was so great, I had this secret part of me that always existed since I was a kid. And I don't have to do that as much anymore. It pops in, I'm not perfect, I still got my stuff, and the biggest thing is, I have, and then I'll shut up, I have one person that I see as a counselor that knows me very well. She happens to be sitting right there, and we've been working together since 2003, and that's been a real benefit for me because I can be totally honest.
Thank you so much. And so I just want to uplift a misconception that I think we kind of skipped or wasn't mentioned from the first question, right? What I realize is that we're all moms, right? And so I think before my ex-husband became a compulsive gambler, I just had this, misconception that most people who are gamblers are just senior citizens, the older people. Right? They get their Social Security checks, right? And then they're off to the casino, right? But then what I've come to discover, no, that's not the case. And so I shared in my bio that, one of my bold Black girl sabbatical statements is choose you and win. So the question is, what is your why to saying, yes to recovery, to saying yes to choosing yourself to win? And not win the bet. We're not, win and choosing to live your life. Cassandra?
I would say now I feel like I'm winning at life. I'm such a better mother. My son was in the National Guard during the pandemic, serving in New York, where he had to deal with the deaths and bodies. And during recovery, I was able to be present for him. I was able to, be that mother to consult him, hear what he's going through as a National Guard soldier. I'm able to be a better daughter to my mother, who's a breast cancer survivor. I'm better educator, I think. um, the little one, I have a little one, I'm a better parent to him. Just today, I had to do something at urgent care, and I'm very present there. And as a soon-to-be ex-wife, I was able to really understand what a marriage is supposed to be. You know, when I was gambling, when I was in that casino, I was definitely escaping from a toxic, horrid marriage. And I'm a better friend. I'm so present as a friend now. You know, I took a lot of my friends to the casino and I wasn't present with them. And my husband and I, you know, we used to gamble too. And it wasn't even like we were bonding as a couple. I'm just so different. I feel like I'm definitely winning at life. But life is so much more purposeful. You know, my value of my dollar is my dollar, as they say. You know, I hold it as a political. I'm conscious about it. I make sure that I'm going to use it for quality of life, my quality of life and what I do with my life and for my future generation. You know, in life, I might have grandchildren. I want to be recognized or be remembered as a legacy, something really good. My grandfather introduced me to gambling, but he was recreational. I'm the one that became the addict. So, and if he's looking down, I'm winning. I'm winning.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. Tara?
Why I choose recovery every day. Is that the prompt here? Man, a lot of us have this loss thing in common, huh? And trauma. Yesterday was the 21st anniversary of my mother's passing. And a friend in recovery called me yesterday to tell me if I was hers, that she'd be proud of me. And I think, you know, that thinking about generational legacy is part of the why. Like, my generational legacy is a whole bunch of people who are addicted to a whole bunch of things. So that's part of my why. The other is I feel truly connected to a higher purpose. I began listening to my version of a higher power, which I call God, and some days I choose to call it the universe, and some days I call it, I don't know what it is, but it's something. And I really feel that all of the things, the pain that I experienced in my life is not for nothing. And I want other women to know that they're worthy, deserving, and capable of living the lives they dreamed are possible, that those desires in their hearts, Dorothy, you mentioned something about like wanting too much, that those desires in their hearts, that some of them are pure desire and they're good desire and they're the desire we should be answering. And so I think that for me is the why, is like, okay, I want to say yes to pure desire and having an impact on the world, so that when it's my grandkids' turn to talk about legacy, they're looking at my generation and saying, that's when the stopping of this BS started.
Thank you, Tara. Dorothy?
Thank you. Well, freedom from the madness. You know, that's what I want. You know, that really spurs me on. But I sometimes think that I don't, even to this day, have enough of wanting for myself as I want for my children. And I know that there's a balance in there. I need to have, you know, for myself. I sometimes live a pretty isolated life, and I'm kind of a loner. And I like parts of it, and then other times I really wish because of the PTSD, I wish I wasn't as afraid to get out there. I'm kind of a germaphobe, and I'd like to be able to help people more, but I don't want them to touch me. You know, it makes it hard. But with my kids, what keeps this thing going is that we've come a long, long way. But even to this day, when my daughter cries about something, I see her woundedness, and I know that comes from me, from a long time ago. from when she was a little girl. And I wish I could wish that away. But I will also tell you that we've had many discussions. And as she's grown up, and she's now in her 30s and wants to have a baby, I see her forgiving me in all kinds of ways on new levels. And some of those levels are because she's grown up and she understands more, that she's made her own mistakes, and she's more accepting that I was a human being that could make mistakes. And so all of it's been great, but it's hard. It's hard work. And to see sometimes my son gets really angry with me, and I see him still as this little boy that was part of what we all went through. Because he went through, his own PTSD and trauma with experience his father's death. And so we all are working, inner working. Both my kids, by the way, went into treatment in their teens for drugs and alcohol. That's because of me. I know it. And so part of all of this is about me becoming, learning on a regular basis and step by step to forgive myself. And sometimes I need them to forgive me, and other times I need to shut up and not bombard them with all my stuff still today. And so it's all a process and a learning process. And I love what both of you said about a legacy. I'm thinking to myself, Moy, I'm closer to the age of, who knows how long I've got, and I don't know if I have much of a legacy. I know that I'm an empathetic person, and I'm a loving person, and I want my kids to know that about me. I can't wait to be a grandmother. It's my last thing I'm thinking about is being a wonderful grandmother, and I've got it on the horizon now. My first grandchild will be in March of next year, and I'm looking forward to that. So it's all glorious because I'm abstinent from gambling and any other kind of things like drinking too much or not working at working my life, out in positive ways, whether it's even mindfulness or, trying to be, worry about what I eat properly, because if I don't eat properly, then what's my dopamine doing, and all these things that I'm learning, and those are things that are important to me. But the biggest reason is because I want this great relationship with my kids.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. And so I just want to really uplift, you wasn't quite sure what your legacy is, but what I thought about from all of you all is that we're all creating a legacy, of breaking generational curses, right? Having tough, authentic conversations with our children, right? I brought my daughter here. She's out of school because they have intercession. She's in a year-round school. And for her to see what mommy does, right? And I'm writing a book, and some of the, about my marriage will be in it. But I'm having these tough conversations with my daughters. I'm in therapy. I have a black therapist. My daughter's in therapy. She's 16 years old, but my other one, she's in 10th grade, right? And so, we are creating this legacy, and we're not even knowing it, right? We're just choosing to live, and choosing to live in itself is a legacy that we are a part of. And I'm also want to uplift, that one of my workshop titles was "It's a Family Affair," because compulsive gambling affects everyone, not just the gambler, right? Not just their spouse. It's their kids. It's their job. My ex-husband lost his job, of 8 years, right? And that was 8 years ago, and he hasn't been financially back to that money or any kind of a career since then, right? And so it's just not one thing, and I'm just really proud of us for being here today and sharing, our own healing journey. Are there any last thoughts for the panelists before we have any questions and close out?
Thanks for all staying awake. It's the last session of the day, right?
Thank you for hanging in there. I hope that those of you who are clinicians and researchers, that you have a lot of diversity, competence, learning about different cultures as it relates to treating, people that come from other places that have gambling addictions to become culturally competent. And research, I mean, there needs to be more research about us, I think. There's not a lot of research there. I challenge you to have courageous conversations, even if you are a clinician and maybe your patient may not look like you. Courageous conversations could help bridge getting that person the help that they need to get to. And thank you for listening to my share. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Cassandra. Anything less you want to say, Dorothy, or are you good?
Well, the one thing I don't know if I've said, because I'm one of these people that when I speak, I have no idea what I just said, but is that during the time, and I'm saying this to the clinician out there, that during the time I was trying to figure out after Doug had died why was destroying my life. This was before gambling. I started telling, I was willing to tell her everything. I had this childhood, I had this problem, I did this, I did that. But then I won my $140,000 and I started gambling. And when I did, I departmentalized it in such a way that I truly did not even I swear to God, it did not occur to me to tell this therapist that I was gambling. And yet, the way she had diagnosed me was because of this compulsive behavior. It would have been helpful if I had told her that. It didn't occur to me. It wasn't until that man stood up in that meeting and he said, I just saved my life by going to the GTP program, that a light bulb went on. So I just say that because there can be people out there that maybe, when I heard a lot of speakers earlier, they talked about identifying and asking questions to the person. I think it's really valuable because I didn't get asked those questions. She didn't ask me why I bought a house. I actually rented a house one time and put $40,000 into it. It was a rental, and I left in 6 months. She didn't ask me why. It was crazy. And so we were on two different and going in two different directions. The therapist and myself. We weren't somehow meeting in a way that was helpful to either one of us, and it was my fault too. So for what it's worth, those questions that we heard people talk about all day, many times today, I think are real important because I didn't do that with my therapist. I didn't ask her anything. I didn't seek help for gambling. I sought help for other things.
Thank you, Dorothy. Are there any questions in the audience or in the Zoom chat from the virtual attendees? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for sharing your stories today. For choosing to win, for choosing to live. Because what Cassandra alluded to but didn't really say is that really addiction is a time sucker. Right? And us being intentionally present is the best gift that we can give ourselves, right? Our kids, family, and friends. Thank you all.